In this video, I'll review the stories in Iain M. Banks' collection of stories, which is called The State of the Art. Iain M. Banks wrote the highly praised and often recommended Culture series of science fiction novels. The Culture is a post-scarcity society with some incredibly powerful AI-run ships, and it has multiple branches within its government, such as Contact and Special Circumstances. Banks also published contemporary fiction under the name Iain Banks, while his sci-fi is under Iain M. Banks. Same guy, two different kinds of books. I've only read Use of Weapons and The Player of Games from the Culture novels, though I'll get to the rest of those one of these days. For now, I'll review his short story collection, The State of the Art. It has 8 stories, some of which are obviously linked to the Culture, some of which it's kind of hard to tell. The first story is called Road of Skulls, and it's basically about a passenger on a cart moving toward a distant city. At one point, the passenger notices that the road is made of large skulls and talks to his companion about it. There really isn't much to this story. It's a semi-humorous tale with a couple of friends bumbling along with each other. One is more serious, the other is more comic relief. There isn't really a story here. I don't know the Culture well enough to state if it really ties into it or not, but I'd only rate this story a 2 out of 10 anyway. Next up is a story called A Gift from the Culture. This one starts off with someone named Robic being coerced into accepting a gun that only a Culture citizen could use. He's supposed to use that gun to do something horrendous, and he doesn't want to do it. He thinks he's got a plan to get out of it, though. The story is short and pretty simple. Robic has questions, though. On a non-Culture world, where did the thugs that gave him the gun get the gun? Why do they want him to do what they're forcing him to do? Who's pulling their strings? Is this part of a bigger plot by someone else in the Culture? He just doesn't know. The ending okay, and I think it's somewhat realistically. Unfortunately, none of the questions I just mentioned get answered in the story, which may also speak to some semblance of realism here. Would someone in the main character's position get those answers? Probably not. So there you go. I'd rate this one a 5 out of 10. The third story is called Odd Attachment. It's basically the story of a sentient plant, or maybe it's a tree, I'm not really sure, lamenting his unrequited love for another being. He watches herds of other creatures around him while he does this, but then a seed-shaped ship lands and a shiny seedling comes out of it. It's a pretty silly story and it ends in a gruesome way. I assume the Culture connection is the ship coming down and making contact, but I'm not sure. It's another story with not a lot to it, and I'd give it maybe a 3 out of 10. The next story is called Descendant. This one starts off with a soldier talking about how he and his suit fell out of the sky when their station was attacked. Unfortunately for them, they landed in the wrong spot on the world below, and there's a lot of barren ground to cover before they can get to the nearest friendly outpost. The story is largely told through the man's thoughts and his conversations with the suit. Much of it is about the struggle they're going through at the moment, but there are some interesting philosophical moments in the story. For example, the man wonders why he thought death as a soldier would be glorious instead of long and drawn out like it seems like it's going to be. There's another point where he and the suit discuss the choices they've had and whether or not it's all worth it. One quote I liked from the story was when the suit says to the man, "You're a machine too. We're both systems. We're both matter with sentience. What makes you think we have more choice than you in the way we think, or that you have so little?" It's an interesting idea that AI might evolve so much that it develops only certain ways to think, or that its thought patterns can be influenced by outside forces like humans instead of it all being pre-programmed like the machine it actually is. I'm not sure how this one ties into the Culture, but I'm thinking it's mainly because the suit in the story is not a slave to the man. It's a being with rights of its own, and it didn't have to join the war either, just like the man didn't have to join the war if he didn't want to. There's also some drones at the end when they finally reach the outpost, which kind of indicates some possible Culture activity. This is a slower story, but Banks kept my interest in what was going on, and I enjoyed both characters, the man and the suit. I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10. The fifth story is called Cleaning Up, and this one starts off with a pig farm where a mysterious object has fallen out of the sky and landed in a farmer's barn. The cops don't know what it is. The Air Force doesn't know what it is, but they take it off the farmer's hands. And many experiments later, someone finally figures out how to open this thing without destroying the contents of it. The story takes place in the United States, and I would interpret it as kind of a satire of the power that corporations hold over the military in the United States. There's this large corporation CEO that can make generals wait outside in his outer office for weeks at a time while he basically sits around and goofs off. There are more events in the story that kind of bear this out, but I'll leave them for you to discover. The story doesn't take itself too seriously, and none of the characters seem like they're meant to be very deep. It's more about the comical events happening. I like the story, and I'd rate it a 7 out of 10. And the next story, called Peace, a man relates how he has had run-ins with people that believe in religious gods. The story seems like it's going absolutely nowhere until the very end, and then that's when certain information hits you in the face. It's a bit of an odd story, but I'd rate it a 7 out of 10 because I enjoyed the Twilight Zone ending that it had. I've always been a big fan of the Twilight Zone. The next story is the longest one in the book, and it's from the title, The State of the Art, and it's definitely related to the culture. It starts off with an intelligent culture ship named Arbitrary taking up orbit around Earth circa 1977. It's masked with superior culture tech, so Earth people have no clue that it's there. While it sits in orbit, agents from Contact, the branch responsible for assessing alien cultures, travel to Earth to collect information and experiences to see if Earth's people should be introduced to the culture. It's told from the perspective of an agent named Dizzy Sma. She visits Earth and does a lot of touristy things and interacts with a lot of different Earth cultures and people that have no idea she's an extraterrestrial. At one point, Arbitrary asks her to speak with another agent on Earth that isn't reporting back the way he should. Not a lot happens in this story. However, it is really interesting because it has a lot of philosophical underpinnings that come through in the dialogue and the observations of the characters. The greatest question the Contact team has is whether Earth should be contacted or just observed and left alone for a long time. There's another passage about communication becoming so rapid on Earth that the entire truth is not always communicated, which I found to be an interesting thought. There's constant talk of how violent and murderous the human species is. One character even describes Earth as a backwater rock ball infested with slavering death zealots on a terrestrial power trip. There's even a long speech in the story where someone touches on the economics of Earth, causing things to gravitate away from those that need them the most and going to those that need them to the least. The bigger philosophical question that gets asked is whether life is worth living if nothing is ever a struggle. The idea being that accomplishment is meaningless if you didn't have to work for it. One character's description of Earth's people and the culture's people kind of sums it up. They're real because they live the way they have to. We aren't because we live the way we want to. The we here is the post-scarcity culture society where anything the citizens need is provided. It did occur to me that if someone in the Contact branch was bored with life and wanted a challenge, they could just go to work for special circumstances, so this lack of difficulty shouldn't really be that much of an issue for anyone. Another quote from the story that I liked was this: absolute certainty isn't even a choice on the menu most times, basically telling you that you just can never be certain about anything in life. Despite the lack of action over such a long story, I really enjoyed this one. It was obvious that Banks put a lot of thought into these positions and his character's attitudes before he finished this story. I'm rating this one an 8 out of 10. The last story in the book is called Scratch. It's a really odd piece that repeats short passages of itself as if it were a vinyl record with a scratch on it that cause it to repeat from time to time. It reads like a bunch of disjointed snippets of commercials, instructions, and conversations all thrown together. I didn't enjoy reading it, and maybe there's something more to it, but to me, it's not worth a reread to find out. I'd rate this a 1 out of 10. And that's it for the state of the art. The average of all the stories comes out at a 5 out of 10, but that's because 3 of those stories were rated 3 or less, which really took the average down. If I were giving this book to a friend, I'd tell them to only read 5 stories: A Gift from the Culture, Descendant, Cleaning Up, Peace, and The State of the Art. These 5 stories have a combined average of 7 out of 10, and they're much stronger than the other 3 stories. I hope you found something useful in this review. If you know that any of these stories has a direct tie to any specific culture book, drop that info or anything else that you want to say about my review in the comments below. Bye for now.